After 2 years of early access, V-Rising reached the big 1.0. The game is done. Complete. Mission accomplished. Finish. Finish? No, Swedish. Ah, okay. Det är klart. No more development needed. What we play is what we get. Fooled you. As with so many games nowadays, the devs will keep developing V-Rising for the foreseeable future. We already know that there's one big of the 3 announced patches coming. Gloomlord was the first, 1.0 was the second, and there's a third one coming, which we don't really know what it'll be yet. And some of the things that are in the game now might be subject to change. And with that in mind, I thought it could be interesting to go through the things that I think need to change. Let's begin with something that isn't the biggest thing, but something I utterly despise, and that's healing potions. They are pretty much useless in fights. The only way to use them is boring. The way potions work now is you press the button you have your potion on and it starts a 30-minute long drinking animation. If you get hit during this animation, the effect of your potion is cancelled. If you don't get hit during the animation, you start healing. Slowly over time, with no initial burst of healing. Your HP bar slowly ticks up 1 millimeter at a time, and if you get hit during this period, the potion stops healing you. The thing they're good for is to heal you after a fight, as a way to not have to consume blood to blood mend. In a fight, you have to find a way to have time for the almost endless drinking animation, and then you'll need to dance around doing nothing but avoiding enemy attacks until the healing is complete, which isn't a very fun way to play the game. It is rare to see something do the thing it's supposed to do as poorly as healing potions heal you in V-Rising. I obviously don't know if this is the case, but it feels like potions at some point during development was considered to be way too overpowered, and then they overcorrected the potions so hard that they're practically not useful at all. And maybe it's the case that a more reliable heal that you can pop at the press of a button would make the game too easy. But why not remove the healing potions altogether then? I'd rather not have something in a game than have a really bad version of it. If they aren't removed, I'd like to see one of these 2 changes. The first is that the drinking animation is dramatically reduced, and instead of just having the potion heal over time, I think at least a third of the healing should come instantly. I don't know if you played Diablo 4, I played a little bit of it, I think it was okay at best, but I do like how the potions work. You get a chunk of healing instantly, and the rest is given over time. If this was the case in V-Rising, I would even be okay with the taking damage cancelling the healing over time effect. I still wouldn't love it, but it wouldn't make them close to useless in a fight. The other way you could change this is to not make them a healing potion, but a potion that gives you a buff, like the resistance potions. You drink a Blood Rose potion and it gives you a significant boost to your HP regeneration for an hour. That way you're not made to believe that there are healing potions you can use, but once you do, you find out that they're terrible. And once again, the third alternative, if the devs don't want any reliable healing outside of the spells that heal, is to remove the healing potions. There's nothing saying that there has to be healing potions in a game. And no one would think that it's crazy if the game said that the way you heal is to consume blood from the victims you bite or to sleep in your coffin. We're vampires, it would make perfect sense. So offline raiding is still a problem. I'm not the biggest fan of raiding altogether in the game, but that's whatever. I don't have to love everything in a game. But the fact that you can log off and then come back to your castle being in shambles and your materials gone isn't great. The fact that you need to log in now and then and feed your castle heart is a nice way to keep players active and most importantly remove the castles of inactive players. But adding reasons why you have to log in regularly risks making the game a chore. And needing to be online during raid hours to not risk your castles being taken without you being there to defend it is a bit much in my opinion. I mean, this happened to me once and it was quite deflating. Then I went upstairs and realized that I had accidentally logged off without closing my balcony door, so not entirely sure whose fault it was in that instance. But I still think that if raiding is supposed to be enjoyable, it needs to be something that players who are online do to other players who are online. So, server populations dwindling is something that we've always seen in V-Rising. I'm a pretty slow player. First of all, I don't have that much time to just sit down and grind in the game. And secondly, I want my games to last, so I make an effort not to rush when I play a game. But that means that when I play V Rising, the PvP servers that I play on eventually turns into a PvE server, because all the normal people are kinda done with everything on the server once I get to the end. And I don't know if there's a fix for that, or if that needs a fix, but the game becomes a little lonely. I love the Rift incursions, they're a lot of fun, but what I wish the dynamic events were when they were announced were some sort of cross-server activities. They talked about this blood key that surely would imply a door. I thought and hoped that this would be some sort of endgame PvP zone that players from different servers could load into. And I still hope that this is a possibility in the future. If the endgame offered things to do with and against other players from different servers, it wouldn't matter if the population on my server dwindled. It would still feel meaningful to have a character with the best gear. I would still play the PvE to make sure I have 100% blood potions and potions for buffs ready for when I make my way into these cross-server activities. Sticking to the server topic for a short one here, it would be nice to be able to switch over to a new server. I know this is something that has been considered by the devs. One thing that made them hesitant is that the castle is such a big part of your progression, but I feel like they've made two changes since the first iteration of Early Access that have paved the way for this being a possibility. One is the castle plots. If I remember correctly, we used to be able to just build anywhere, and then they added the plot systems that we have today. With this, it's easy to know if a player can move to a new server and be able to build a castle. The second one is the castle relocation system. Place a relocation castle heart on a new server and rebuild your castle as you would if you relocate within a server. Or if this isn't possible, another way could be to give players starting gear and material depending on what your castle heart level was on the server you relocate from. This would give you a good indication of how far the player had progressed on the previous server and what materials and gear would be appropriate to start with on the new one. The final 2 points both have to do with spells. Before I get into it, I'd just like to say that if you've stuck around this far, chances are you enjoy the video. If you do, subscribing to the channel helps a small channel like mine out a lot. Alright, back to the spells. I'd like it if there was a faster way to swap out spells. The main reason for this is that there are spells that are extremely useful in PvE that are pretty much useless in PvP and vice versa. For example, the Skeleton Shield. It's great in PvE, cause it takes aggro, but is useless in PvP, cause other players will simply ignore the skeletons. On the flip side, Soulburn might be the best PvP spell in the game, while I find myself leaning more towards Chaos Volleys or Sanguine Coils to be able to damage enemies from a long range in PvE. So if I fight a boss and suddenly another vampire shows up, I'll have a Skeleton Shield while I'd rather have the Lightning counter, and the Sanguine Coils when I'd rather have my Soulburn. One good solution to this problem in my mind would be to have 2 spell loadouts that you can prepare and switch between by the press of a button. And just like with your weapon abilities, the cooldowns between your M2, your R, your space and your F would be shared. One way to do this could be to have your spells tied to your rings or amulets. And just like using number keys to swap out weapons, we could do the same to swap our rings or amulets. My final point has to do with spell progression, and it ties to an old criticism I've had of this game, namely the lack of specialization. More on that soon. But with 1.0 they introduced a new spell system. Instead of gaining a specific spell from killing a boss, you now gain a spell point that you can choose to spend of any spell of the corresponding tier of that spell point in its spell school. You know this. I really like this change, cause it gives us more choice in how we spec our characters and give more variation in what spells and abilities different players on a server will use. But there's a problem. That's only true in the beginning of the game, cause after a while, every player will have unlocked every spell in the game and we're all the same vampire again. So the lack of variety and specialization that the former spell system had isn't really solved, it's just postponed. Once again, I have a suggestion for a solution. Yay me! I would like it if instead of spending spell points to unlock a new spell, we could spend it to slightly upgrade one of the spells we already have unlocked. Either we unlock something similar similar to the passive abilities, or it could just be slight stat buffs, a little more damage, a little lower cooldown. Personally, I'm pretty set in what spells I use by now. There are definitely more spells that I don't use than spells that I use, and it would feel much more meaningful to be able to use the spell points to improve the spells that I use, rather than unlock a bunch of spells that I don't want and won't use anyways. Here's the thing about community feedback. We're just players in the end. I'm not a game dev, and I'm certainly not under the illusion that I'm the smartest person in the world. Heck, I'm not even the smartest person in this room. I talked to Jeremy Bearson Fielding, community manager for V-Rising, about this in an interview that we did. And he said something along the lines of, you might not always want to listen to the suggested solutions that players have, because a lot of them the devs have probably already thought about and decided against. Once again, I'm not under the illusions that these suggested solutions that I've brought up are spectacular or that I'm the first person to think of them. Chances are there are things in the game that make these solutions hard to implement or outright bad. The upgrading spell things may very well have been tested but decided against for balancing reasons. Or it would make the game more complex than the devs want it to be. Or they like the game the way it is in that regard. I mean, what do I know? However, while the suggested solutions might not be great, the underlying problems that make us think of these solutions are valuable feedback. So consider the suggested solutions to these problems more like conversation starters. Who knows? One of these might be a good idea, even in the eyes of SLS, but more importantly, it's interesting to discuss the game, both its good sides and it's bad. And while I do love V-Rising, these things that I've talked about in this video are things that I'm not very fond of. Videos like this, however, are so much more interesting to put out there if they actually get to be conversation starters. So if you've made it all the way here and still have a minute, I would be thrilled if you went down to the comment section and let me know what you think about the things I've said. And who knows, maybe you have other suggestions for solutions to these problems, or a list of other things that you'd like to see changed about the game. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you'll watch the next one too.